Welcome to Chapter 3, Section 1, Transformations of Quadratic Functions. So before we've translated absolute value functions, now the function is just changing. So instead of absolute value bars, you're going to have parentheses and a square. And that's the function. That's not a transformation. Okay, that's the basic function. So it's always going to look like a parentheses x minus h squared plus k, where a, h, and k are numbers, and a cannot equal 0. Okay, so here's what they look like, just so you have some kind of visual, right? Horizontal translation, that's left and right. The vertical is up or down. The horizontal stretches and shrinks. You can see, if you look at this picture, they go out and in, okay? For the vertical stretch and shrink, if you look right below it, they stretch up so that they get thinner and down so that they get fatter. And then the reflection in the x-axis and the y-axis. Now you might notice that the reflection in the y-axis looks very similar to the original problem, and it is, because just like that absolute value function, that was a v, where if you flip it over the y-axis, it looks exactly the same. It's going to do the same thing, because it's actually symmetric about that axis. Now, just like before, if it's outside in front, it's a stretch or shrink. If it's inside and in front, it's a stretch or shrink also. The h, so the thing that's inside after x, that's your left-right. And the k, that's your up-down. We're just giving them letters that you have something to reference to, but I'm really not going to reference that too often. So let's go ahead and do some problems. First, we want to move 5 units up. So if it's up, it goes outside. Outside because it's vertical. Remember, inside horizontal, high, and we do the inverse. But outside is vertical, and we do the same. So this is 5 units up, which means it's vertical. So it goes outside. The question is, does it go in front or back? Well, because it's up, it goes in the back. So the answer would just be x squared, and then because it's 5 units up, it's plus 5. Because for part B, we're moving 6 units down. Same thing, vertical, which means we don't change it. And the sign for down is normally negative, so x squared would be minus 6. Now 4 units left, that's horizontal. That means it goes inside, which means we have to create an inside. So this time, instead of absolute value bars, you have parentheses squared. Okay, you have to have that square or it's not quadratic, it's linear. So we need that square to indicate what kind of function it is. Because it's 4 units left, it is inside, and it's inverse. So instead of left being to the negative, it's actually going to be positive, so it'll be x plus 4. And then when we move to the right, 1 unit to the right, we have the same thing, the parentheses squared. And then because it's moving to the right, it's going to be x minus 1, because inside we do the inverse every single time. Let's talk about reflections. Now, if I have a reflection in the x-axis, it's going to go exactly where it was before, outside. So we'll have negative and then x squared. Now, because that negative is outside anyway, you can just write that. That's the same thing as having negative x squared, right? Because the parentheses don't have to be there. There's nothing inside for you to have to distribute or anything else like that. When we have a reflection in the y-axis, remember that goes inside, which means it actually looks like this, negative x squared. But we know from math, right? We know that if I have a negative x times a negative x, a negative negative makes it positive. So that actually turns into positive x squared. So it is very possible for you to see that as an answer. Either one would be fine. Stretches and shrinks. Now remember, vertical goes outside, horizontal goes inside. So high again, and outside vertical same. So a horizontal stretch by a factor of 5. Well, it's horizontal, so it has to go inside. So let's make an inside. Because it's a stretch, it goes in front. So we're going to have something in front right here. And then because it's by a factor of 5 and it's horizontal, remember, we have to take that 5 and flip it. So it is no longer 5, it is 1/5. And there we go. For the horizontal shrink, similar, right? By a factor of 1/3, still goes inside. So we'll have parentheses squared. It's a shrink, so it goes in front. So we don't have anything behind the x. And then it's by 1/3. But again, because it's horizontal, we have to take that 1/3 and flip it so it actually becomes a 3. For vertical stretches and shrinks, we don't do anything. We leave it just by itself. It goes out front, so we'll have the x squared, right? So we're setting it up so that we have an outside. And then the 1/4 doesn't change. It's just 1/4, right? No change. Outside is vertical and it stays the same. The vertical stretch by a factor of 2, same thing. So that's just 2x squared, right? Goes out front and no change. Now remember, you don't have to write those parentheses this time because there's nothing to do with them. There's nothing to distribute. That really just simplifies to these two things. So sometimes we have to do multiple transformations at the same time. So let's go ahead and do one of those. We have a horizontal stretch by a factor of 3 followed by something else. So let's do the horizontal stretch by a factor of 3 first. That's what we're doing first. All right, so because it's horizontal, it goes inside. Because horizontal goes inside, and we do the inverse. So that 3 is going to turn into a 1/3. So that's 1/3 x squared. That's on the inside, and we flipped it. Followed by a translation 10 units down. So because it's 10 units down, that's actually a movement down, and it's vertical, so it goes outside, right? Up and down, that's vertical, outside. Stretches and shrinks go in the front, so this has to go in the back. And because it's vertical, we leave the sign alone. Down is negative, so it'll be minus 10. And that's the answer. Example 5. We have a vertical shrink of the graph of x squared. So it says by a factor of 1/2. So vertical shrink by 1/2. Well, that goes outside. Vertical goes outside. Remember, horizontal goes inside, vertical goes outside. So we have x squared, and the 1/2 is going outside. Do we have to flip it? No, because it's not horizontal, it's vertical. So it stays the same. Now, I remember I can simplify that to 1/2 x squared, and it doesn't change anything. It's followed by a reflection in the x-axis. Well, a reflection in the x-axis goes outside, and when it goes outside of everything that's already been there. So we have to take the whole thing and put it in parentheses. Then the reflection is a negative, so we get this. Now, good news, we don't have to do anything here. There's nothing really to distribute to the end, so it's just negative 1/2 x squared. And that's the answer. Have a great day.